The desert sun burned bright over the endless dunes, casting long, golden shadows that shimmered like waves of fire. From her high fortress, Queen Zoraya watched the horizon with sharp eyes, her heart tightening. Her daughters, lively, brave, and curious, had vanished one by one. Each disappearance left a hollow ache in her chest. She called their names across the silent courtyard, but no response came. Panic rose in her throat. Her youngest daughter, Lyra, had always been fearless. She ran across the sands with her sisters, chasing the sun and wind as if the desert itself were a playground. Yet now, Lyra was gone. And the more Zoraya searched, the more impossible the situation seemed. Guards reported nothing. The fortress felt strangely empty without the laughter and energy of the girls. Far across the dunes, Kale, a lone human nomad, trudged through the sand. His water skin was nearly empty, and the sun beat down mercilessly on his back, but he moved with steady determination. Unlike the alien queen and her daughters, Kale did not have grand powers or advanced technology. What he did have was instinct, patience, and an unshakable sense of hope. Humans, he had learned, could endure harsh worlds by relying on each other and on their hearts. Kale had been following strange tracks across the desert for days. They were light, delicate, almost hidden, yet he noticed them. The subtle impressions of tiny feet in sand, the occasional disturbed tuft of alien grass. He felt a pull in his chest, a sense that someone needed him. Humans had a way of sensing need, even when the signals were faint. He didn't know whose tracks they were, but he knew he had to find them. As the sun dipped lower, turning the sky a deep crimson, Kale finally caught sight of movement near a ridge. A small figure crouched in the sand, shivering. The figure looked frightened, and yet there was a curiosity in its eyes that mirrored Kale's own. He approached slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Hey," he said softly, careful not to startle it. "I'm not here to hurt you." The small alien froze, its bright amber eyes widened, ears twitching. Kyle could feel the fear radiating off the child, but he also felt something else, a spark of recognition, a sense of trust buried under layers of terror. Kale sat down a few feet away, letting the wind brush past him. He pulled out the last of his water and carefully poured a little in a shallow dish. "Drink if you're thirsty," he said gently. The child hesitated, then crept closer, sniffing the water before taking a tentative sip. The moment was fragile, but Kale understood that trust could grow from patience and small acts of kindness. He stayed with her as the desert night fell, offering warmth and presence without demanding anything in return. Humans, he thought, had a strange kind of strength. They could be brave without weapons, powerful without force, and gentle even in the harshest conditions. Meanwhile, Queen Zoraya raged within her fortress. How could her daughters vanish without a trace? She summoned her elite scouts, demanding they scour every inch of the desert. Yet nothing came back. Her fury burned hot, but beneath it was a deeper, quieter fear, the fear of loss. She had never felt powerless before. Her daughters had always been fearless, but now the desert swallowed them whole. Back at the ridge, the small alien finally relaxed enough to lean against Kale's chest. Her tiny claws dug slightly into his tunic, but Kale did not flinch. Instead, he wrapped his arms around her gently, feeling her trembling slowly ease. She was exhausted, hungry, and afraid, but she was alive. Kale whispered softly, "You're safe now." The words were simple, but they carried a weight of comfort that transcended language. The child blinked slowly, her amber eyes heavy with relief. Against the harsh desert and the fierce alien world, she had found warmth and safety in a human's arms. Far above, the first stars appeared, tiny pinpricks of hope in a vast, dark sky. Kyle held the child close, listening to the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. The desert wind sang around them, carrying with it the promise of new beginnings. Somewhere her sisters might still be out there, but for now at least one had found solace. Queen Zoraya's scouts returned empty-handed, but the queen felt an unusual sensation. a whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe, the bond between species could bring her daughters home. She could not yet see it fully, but somewhere in the desert something was shifting. The smallest of her daughters rested on a human's chest, alive and trusting. A seed of hope in a world that had seemed so cold. Cale adjusted his hold, careful not to squeeze too tightly. The child snuggled closer, curling up as if she had always known she belonged here. It was a strange, miraculous sight. A fierce alien child, finding peace in the arms of a human nomad. Cale's heart swelled, not with pride, but with purpose. Humanity had a way of reaching out, of protecting and healing even when the odds seemed impossible. The night stretched on, the cold creeping in, but neither Kyle nor the child moved. In that quiet, shared moment, the impossible felt a little more possible. And somewhere in the distance, Queen Zoraya's sharp gaze scanned the horizon, unaware that the first of her daughters had been found, safe, alive, and resting against a human's chest. The desert was vast and full of danger, but for one small, fierce alien, it had become a place of safety. And for Cale, it had become a place where humanity's quiet strength shone brighter than the harshest sun. The desert, morning came slowly, painting the sand in soft shades of gold and pink. Kyle awoke with the first light, the small alien child still curled against his chest. Her breathing was steady now, no longer frantic or afraid. Kyle smiled softly. In the quiet, he felt a strange mix of sadness and determination. He missed the home he had left behind long ago, and yet, here he was, far from his own people, reaching out to help someone else. The child stirred, blinking at the rising sun. Cale held out a hand. "Come on," he said gently. "We have to move before the heat gets too strong." Slowly, she got to her feet, still hesitant but trusting. Cale could feel the tiny pulse of fear mixed with curiosity in her heartbeat. Humans, he thought, had a way of sensing emotion, not just in themselves but in anyone around them. That skill, small as it seemed, could make a huge difference. As they walked through the dunes, Cale noticed signs of other travelers, footprints, faint scuffs in the sand. He sensed a possibility. Maybe the missing sisters were nearby. Yet he also knew the desert was dangerous, and any mistake could be fatal for the small alien child in his care. Kyle stopped at a rocky outcrop, offering the child shade. "We need to rest," he said. She nodded, still too shy to speak. Humans had a way of teaching patience without words. Cale watched her quietly, thinking about his own family, long gone across distant lands. He felt a pang of loneliness, a longing to reconnect with someone he had once cared for. But he knew that hope, even when far away, could guide action. The child touched his arm lightly, as if sensing his thoughts. Cale smiled. "I know," he whispered. "I miss them too." Even though the child could not understand all his words, she understood the meaning behind them. Humans had a way of communicating trust and care without relying on complicated speech. That was a power stronger than any weapon or machine. Hours passed under the harsh sun. Kyle found a small oasis, hidden by rocks and shrubs, and led the child to it. Water pooled in shallow basins, and a few green plants gave shade. The child drank eagerly, then sat beside Kyle, her small body still trembling from exhaustion and fear. Kyle knew he could not solve the mystery of the vanishing daughters alone, but he could give her something no one else had offered: safety, warmth, and hope. He thought of the Queen, searching desperately for her children. The idea of a mother's worry struck him deeply. Humans had a way of understanding emotion through empathy, even for beings vastly different from themselves. Kyle felt a surge of determination. He would help this child find her sisters, no matter how impossible it seemed. That was what humans did. They reached across differences, faced danger, and acted when others might give up. As evening fell, Cale noticed movement at the edge of the oasis. A faint shimmer of light, almost like the reflection of scales, appeared. He froze, then signaled the child to stay calm. Slowly he approached, careful not to startle whatever was coming. It was another alien child, smaller than the first, peeking nervously from behind a rock. She seemed frightened, unsure whether to run or stay. Kale crouched low, speaking softly. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "You're safe here." The child hesitated, then stepped closer, drawn by the first child who had begun to relax beside Kale. Slowly, the two alien children circled each other, then finally sat together. Kale watched, his heart lifting. Humans had a natural gift for creating connection, even in the most difficult circumstances. By showing calm, kindness, and patience, he had given the first child a reason to trust, and now, perhaps, the second. Night fell, and the stars stretched across the sky like a million tiny lanterns. Kyle set up a small fire, careful not to let it flare too high. The children watched the flames, fascinated by the flickering light. He shared the last of his food with them, breaking it into small pieces, showing them how to eat safely. They mimicked his movements, slowly learning that they could rely on him. Kale thought of the Queen again. How would she feel if she knew her daughters had been found not through force but through trust? Humans had a strange kind of power, the ability to heal, to calm, to protect. It was not a power of conquest, but of heart. Kale smiled quietly, knowing that he was part of something bigger than himself. The two children finally curled up against him, tired from the day's journey. Kyle felt the steady rhythm of their breathing, the tiny pulses of life. That reassured him. Despite the vast, dangerous desert and the mysterious vanishing of the daughters, hope remained. The Queen might still search in anger and worry, but Kale had begun to create a bridge between their worlds, a bridge built on care, understanding, and courage. As Kale drifted into a light sleep, he thought about the distant family he had lost, the friends he could not reach. The sadness lingered, but it no longer felt like defeat. Hope was a human gift, and he carried it forward. The two children curled against his chest were proof that even in the harshest circumstances, trust and connection could survive. And somewhere in the desert under the watchful stars, the first step toward reunion had been taken. The missing daughters were not yet all safe, but Kale's presence had shown them the warmth and courage of humanity. In the morning, he would continue to search. He would keep walking, keep hoping, and keep protecting. Humans had a way of enduring, of connecting, and of creating light where darkness seemed endless. The night wind whispered across the dunes, carrying a quiet promise. One by one, the missing daughters might yet be found, safe, alive, and trusting the human who had become their guardian. Kyle's chest rose and fell beneath them, steady and warm, as if holding the weight of hope itself. The desert was vast, the danger real, but in the arms of a human, the first small miracle had already happened. And so the daughters curled up against the human's chest, a fragile trust that promised more than safety. It promised hope, connection, and the start of something greater. The desert stretched endlessly, waves of gold and red under the scorching sun. Kale rose early, the two alien children still curled against his chest from the night's rest. Their trust had grown slowly, day by day, but it was fragile. Kale knew he could not stop now. There were more daughters out there, scared and alone, and he needed to find them before danger reached them. He packed lightly, careful to leave the children safe among the rocks and shrubs. "Stay here," he said softly. "I'll be back soon." The children hesitated, their eyes wide, but Kale smiled reassuringly. Humans had a way of showing presence through action, not just words. They understood instinctively when someone meant well, and Kale had learned to move with patience and care. The first hours of the journey were slow. The desert sun beat down relentlessly, sand shifting underfoot, making each step a test of endurance. Kale paused often, scanning the horizon for any signs of the missing daughters. He remembered the empty feeling from his own past, the distance from someone he cared about, now far away. It was that feeling that drove him forward. Humans could feel deeply, even across impossible distances, and sometimes that feeling became the strength to act. By mid-afternoon, Kyle spotted movement near a cluster of dunes. He froze. A figure, a small alien girl, was crouched low, her eyes scanning the sands. She was terrified, trembling as though she expected the desert itself to attack her. Kyle's heart ached. He knew that fear well. He had felt distant from loved ones, had felt the emptiness of separation, and now he understood how it could shape even the bravest into frightened children. Kyle took a slow, careful step forward. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." His voice carried warmth, calm, and steady reassurance. Humans had a unique ability to communicate safety without force. It was a strength born from empathy and patience. The girl stiffened, then backed up slightly, unsure. Kale did not rush. He lowered himself to the sand, showing he was no threat. Hours passed. The sun began to dip low, shadows stretching across the dunes. Kale moved closer in careful increments, every step measured, every word gentle. He brought water and food, placing them a few feet away. Slowly, hesitantly, the girl crept forward to drink. Her breathing slowed, her sharp claws relaxed. Kyle smiled quietly. Trust, he knew, had to be earned. Humans understood that sometimes the smallest gestures could mean the most. The alien child's eyes softened slightly, and Kale sensed she was beginning to recognize him not as a threat, but as a protector. He sat back, letting the child approach in her own time. When she finally stepped close enough to touch his hand, he remained still. A small connection had formed, a spark of hope amid the vast, harsh desert. As the sun set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Kale knew he could not stay still for long. The other children might be nearby, and danger could come at any moment. He extended a hand. "Come with me," he said gently. "You can trust me." The girl hesitated, fear and instinct battling with curiosity and need. Finally, slowly, she took his hand. Humans had a way of inspiring courage even in the most frightened beings, not through force but through calm and care. Together, they moved toward the oasis where the first two daughters waited. The journey was quiet, but not lonely. Kale could feel the girl's heartbeat, fast and erratic at first, then gradually slowing as she sensed safety. Humans had a power that transcended words, the ability to connect through presence, patience, and quiet reassurance. Kyle's heart swelled as he realized that he was not just finding the missing daughters. He was helping them heal from fear, even if just a little. When they reached the oasis, the two other daughters recognized their sister immediately. Their small bodies tensed with relief, and then slowly, they approached Kale together, curling up against him. One child nuzzled into his chest, another rested her head on his shoulder, and the newest daughter hesitated a few steps away before finally joining them. The moment was fragile, yet beautiful. In that quiet desert, amid the harsh winds and endless sand, trust had grown stronger than fear. Kale looked at them, his chest tight with emotion. Humans had a way of feeling deeply, of understanding the pain of separation, and of acting despite uncertainty. He thought of the loved ones he had once felt distant from, and he understood that hope could bridge even the widest gaps. He was distant from his own home, yet here, he had created connection, safety, and love. Night fell again, and the desert grew cold. Kale gathered the children close, wrapping them in blankets he had brought. He thought of Queen Zariah, searching desperately for her daughters, and wondered if she would ever understand the strange bond that had formed between her children and this human. Humans, he realized, could achieve the impossible, not through strength alone, but through courage, empathy, and care. The children curled up against him, their bodies small and trembling, yet safe. Kyle rested his head lightly against the eldest, feeling the steady pulse of life. He felt the sadness of his own distant connections, the ache of being far from those he loved. But he also felt hope. If he could bring trust and warmth to these alien children, perhaps one day he could reconnect with those he had lost. Humans had a way of never giving up, of building bridges even across impossible distances. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying a quiet promise. The missing daughters could be safe, alive, and trusting a human's care. Kyle held them, close, steady and warm, a living shield against the harshness of the world. In the distance, the horizon glimmered with the first hint of stars. The journey was far from over, but the first step toward reunion had been taken. And so, as the children curled up on the human's chest, a fragile, unbreakable trust began to form. A trust that would carry hope across the desert, across worlds, and across the distance of hearts separated by fear and uncertainty. The desert air was cooler in the early morning, and Kale stirred quietly, careful not to wake the 3 alien children curled against him. He had grown used to the rhythm of their breathing, the small movements, the tiny claws resting lightly on his clothes. Each night he held them close. He felt a strange mix of sadness and purpose. The same feeling he had when he thought of someone he loved, now distant yet still cherished in memory. Humans had a way of carrying hope across distances, even when separated by worlds or years, and Kale knew that hope could be shared. The sun climbed slowly, painting the dunes in soft gold. Kale stood, stretching his tired muscles. "We have to keep moving," he whispered, more to himself than the children. They stirred at his words, blinking sleepily, their trust evident in their quiet compliance. Kale felt a pang of longing, thinking of those he had left behind, yet he pushed it aside. The children needed him, and for now, that was enough. As they moved across the dunes, Kale noticed signs that someone had been nearby recently. Tracks, too small for adult aliens, and faint impressions that suggested scouts or predators might have passed. His heart tightened. He knew the Queen's guards were likely searching for her daughters, and he could not allow them to find the children, unprepared. Humans had a way of thinking ahead, of planning for dangers others might overlook. Kale's mind raced with strategies to protect them. They reached a narrow canyon that offered shelter from the relentless sun. Kyle led the children into the shade, pointing out places to rest and hide. He shared the last of his food, breaking it into tiny pieces and showing them how to eat safely. They mimicked him, still cautious, still learning to trust but moving closer with each small gesture. Patience, Kale reminded himself, was the key. Humans had a gift for persistence, for connecting through calm actions rather than force. As they rested, Kyle's sharp ears picked up faint sounds, rustling whispers of movement. Scouts were nearby. He tensed, knowing the danger was real. If the alien guards discovered the children alone, it could end badly. He crouched low, whispering to the children, "Stay quiet and stay close. I'll handle this." Their eyes widened, but they obeyed. Kale's presence alone gave them courage. Humans had a way of inspiring bravery not through strength, but through calm and confidence. Kale moved stealthily, scanning the canyon for any sign of the scouts. He spotted a group of 3, their armor glinting in the sun. They paused, scanning the area, and Kale realized he had to act carefully. Using the rocks and shadows as cover, he approached from the side, careful to remain unseen. Humans had a gift for improvisation and ingenuity, and Kale's mind worked quickly. He created a small distraction. A rock tumbled down the canyon slope, drawing the guards' attention. They turned, following the sound, and Kale slipped back to the children. "Come on," he whispered urgently, guiding them to a narrow, hidden crevice in the rocks. The children huddled together, their small bodies trembling but safe. Kyle held them close, feeling their tiny heartbeats against his chest. It was a strange comfort, one that reminded him of the distance he felt from someone he cared about, in another life, another place. Humans had a way of channeling that longing into action, into protection, into love that crossed barriers of species and fear. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip low in the sky. Kyle knew they could not stay in the canyon forever. He needed to find a safer place somewhere hidden where the children could rest without fear. He scanned the dunes and spotted a small grove of alien flora, rare in the desert that offered shade and water. It would be difficult to reach, but it promised safety. Humans had a way of enduring hardship, of pushing forward despite uncertainty. Kale smiled softly, thinking of the hope he carried. The journey to the grove was slow, the children relying on him entirely. He encouraged them with gentle words, his voice steady, calming and warm. They leaned against him, trusting him completely. Kyle thought of the loved ones he had once felt distant from, the longing he carried in his heart. Humans could transform sadness into strength, fear into action, and distance into connection. He felt that strength now, guiding him across the desert to safety. When they reached the grove, Kyle allowed the children to rest under the shade, drinking from the shallow pools of water. He kept watch, alert for any danger, knowing the Queen's scouts could be near at any time. The children began to explore cautiously, gaining confidence with each step. Kyle watched them, a quiet pride swelling in his chest. Humans had a way of inspiring growth and trust, even in the most frightened beings. Night fell, and the stars glittered overhead. Kale built a small fire, careful to keep it low and hidden. He gathered the children close, their bodies warm and safe against him. He thought of the Queen searching desperately for her daughters, and he hoped she would understand that their trust in him did not replace her love, but complemented it. Humans had a way of showing care beyond what was expected, of bridging gaps between worlds through empathy and courage. Kale whispered softly to the children, "You are safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you." They curled closer, their eyes heavy with exhaustion, finally allowing themselves to rest fully in his arms. The wind whispered through the grove, carrying the quiet promise that they could be safe, alive and loved. Kale closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of their small bodies against his chest. He thought of the people he had left behind, the ones he cared for but felt distant from, and he realized that the same hope that had driven him to protect these children could one day bring him back to them. Humans had a way of never giving up, of bridging distances, and of creating trust and love where none had existed before. And so, as the 3 alien daughters rested curled against him, Kyle held them close, steady and warm, embodying the human strength that was not in force or weaponry but in heart, courage, and hope. In the quiet desert night they slept safe alive, and beginning to trust a human completely. The desert stretched endlessly under a pale morning sun. Kyle awoke to find the 3 alien daughters curled against him, their small bodies warm and trusting. He smiled softly. Every day he felt the weight of responsibility more deeply, but he also felt the hope that had carried him this far. Humans had a way of holding hope tightly, even when the distance from someone they cared about made their hearts ache. Kale packed lightly for another day of travel. The children had begun to trust him enough to follow without hesitation. Their steps were small, careful but certain, and their confidence gave him courage. As they moved through the shifting dunes, Kale scanned the horizon. Something about the desert had changed. There were faint signs, tiny disturbances in the sand, marks on rocks, even broken branches, that suggested the daughters' disappearance was not random. Someone, or something, had drawn them out. He stopped near a ridge, crouching to examine the tracks. Humans had a way of noticing details others might miss, the faintest imprint, the smallest change in terrain. He traced the path with his fingers and realized that the children had not wandered alone. They had been following something, or someone, and the trail had led them here to him. A pang of understanding and worry tightened his chest. Humans felt deeply for those they loved, and he realized that just like he missed someone far away, these children had felt the absence of safety and sought connection in the only way they could. The youngest child, Lyra, watched him silently, her amber eyes full of curiosity and caution. Kale knelt, meeting her gaze. "Someone wanted to draw you here," he whispered, "but I'm glad it brought you to me. You're safe now." Humans had a gift for expressing care in a way that transcended fear, and Kale knew that trust could grow even in the most wary hearts. As they continued, the wind shifted, carrying faint sounds. Kyle stiffened. Alien scouts were likely near, searching desperately for the missing daughters. He signaled the children to stay close, crouching behind, a small outcrop of rocks. Humans had a way of thinking ahead, of planning for danger while keeping those in their care calm and safe. Kyle observed the scouts, noting their movements, their habits. He realized he had an advantage, understanding patterns, noticing subtle signals and acting with empathy rather than force. The scouts passed without noticing them. Kyle exhaled quietly, relief washing over him. The children relaxed slightly, sensing the momentary safety. He offered them water, careful to make each gesture gentle and deliberate. The smallest acts of care could have a profound effect. Humans had a way of creating trust with patience and attention, and Kale was beginning to see it work with the daughters. Hours later, Kale reached a small canyon where the tracks grew more complex. The marks suggested not only movement but curiosity. Objects disturbed, plants nudged, sand shifted in patterns that hinted at exploration. It was then that Kale realized the truth. The daughters had vanished not because of malice, but because of instinct. They had sought comfort, warmth, and connection, qualities humans could offer in ways aliens did not always understand. Kale knelt, examining the disturbed sand. "You were looking for someone to care for you," he whispered, more to himself than the children. He thought of those he cared about, the people he had felt distant from. Humans had a way of longing for connection, of reaching across distance and fear. That longing could become action, could become protection, could become hope. And now, Kale understood that the daughters' instincts were leading them to the same truth. Trust and warmth could be found in a human's heart. The children explored cautiously, nudging each other, their fear giving way to curiosity. Kale observed, knowing that each step forward was a victory. Humans had a way of turning small moments into lasting bonds. He thought about the loved ones he had left behind, the ones he could not yet reach. The sadness he felt now was not defeat. It was motivation. Humans had a way of channeling longing into action, and Kale felt that power guiding him. As the sun began to sink, painting the desert in deep reds and purples, Kale noticed a shimmer in the sand nearby. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but he recognized it immediately. A small discarded token, something familiar from the daughter's fortress. He picked it up carefully, realizing it was a clue, a piece of the mystery. The daughters had not wandered randomly. They had been drawn by subtle signs of safety, warmth, and guidance. Humans had a way of noticing patterns, of seeing meaning where others saw only chaos. Kale understood now why the daughters had vanished. They had sensed him. He gathered the children close, speaking softly. "We are going to find the rest of your sisters," he said. "I don't know how yet, but we will." Their small bodies pressed against him, trusting him completely. In that moment, Kale felt the same longing he had felt for someone far away, but transformed into hope. Humans had a way of carrying hope even when separated by distance, even when the path was uncertain. Night fell, and Kyle set up a small fire in a sheltered part of the canyon. The children huddled against him, their eyes heavy but alert. He thought about the queen, searching desperately for her daughters. He hoped she would understand that trust and care could bridge worlds. Humans had a way of connecting across differences, of creating bonds that went beyond fear, beyond species, beyond distance. Kyle whispered to the children, "You are safe with me. I will not let anything harm you." Their breathing slowed, their bodies relaxing, their trust deepening. He felt the weight of responsibility, but also the power of action born from empathy and courage. Humans could face impossible odds, navigate unknown dangers, and still provide hope where none existed. As the fire flickered and the stars shone overhead, Kale realized that the mystery of the vanished daughters was less about danger and more about trust. They had sought connection, warmth, and safety, and they had found it in a human. The desert was still vast and full of challenges, but with patience, understanding, and courage, Kale knew he could guide them safely. And so the daughters rested against him, their small bodies curled on the human's chest, trusting completely. Kyle's heart swelled with hope. Humans had a way of enduring, connecting and creating light where there was only darkness. The night whispered promises of reunion, of understanding, and of the bond that had begun to form. A bond strong enough to overcome distance, fear, and uncertainty. The desert night was quiet, except for the soft crackle of Kyle's small fire. The three alien daughters slept, curled against him, their trust complete. He watched the stars above, thinking of those he cared about and felt distant from, the loved ones far away who seemed unreachable. Humans had a way of feeling distance deeply, of missing those they loved, but they also had a way of turning that longing into action. That was what Kale had done for these children, turned empathy and hope into protection, warmth and guidance. Suddenly, movement appeared at the edge of the canyon. Shadows grew and the unmistakable shapes of alien guards emerged. Kyle's heart tightened. He had been careful, but now the Queen's elite scouts had found them. He looked down at the daughters, still asleep, and felt a surge of determination. Humans had a way of facing fear and standing strong, even when separated from those they loved or facing impossible odds. He would protect them, no matter the cost. The guards approached, scanning the canyon. Their eyes narrowed as they spotted the small fire and the faint outlines of the human and the children. Kyle rose slowly, holding his hands out, speaking in the universal tones he had learned from observing the aliens. "I mean no harm," he said. "They are safe with me." The guards hesitated, uncertain. Humans had a way of showing courage without weapons, of inspiring respect through presence, alone. Kyle met their gaze steadily. "I will not let anything hurt them," he continued. "They trust me. That is why they are safe." From the shadows, the Queen herself emerged, her presence commanding and fierce. Queen Zoraya's eyes blazed as she took in the scene, her daughters safe, curled against a human's chest. Rage flared within her, then faltered as she saw the calm, protective strength in Kale's posture. Her daughters stirred slightly, sensing the Queen's presence but not retreating. Kale realized that trust had been earned, not through force, but through care. Humans had a way of connecting hearts, even across species. Kale knelt, keeping the children close. "Your daughters were afraid," he said softly. "They needed safety, warmth, and someone they could trust. I have given them that." The Queen's eyes narrowed, but she listened. Humans had a way of speaking honestly, of showing empathy, and that honesty reached her even through her anger. The children stirred, recognizing their mother, but also feeling the safety of Kale's presence. Slowly they opened their eyes, and their tiny claws clutched at Kyle. He smiled gently, feeling the weight of their trust. Humans had a way of creating bonds through calm courage, patience, and understanding, and he realized that this moment was proof. Queen Zoraya's voice was sharp but quieter now. "Why should I trust you?" she asked. Kale met her gaze without fear. "Because they chose to trust me," he said. "They needed someone who would not harm them, someone who would protect them when no one else could. Humans do not always act out of strength alone. Sometimes we act out of care, courage, and hope." The Queen studied him, her gaze softening slightly as she saw the children curled against him. She saw the peace in their eyes, the trust in their posture. She realized that the bond they shared with this human was real, not a threat, but a bridge. Humans had a way of inspiring trust and hope, even in the fiercest hearts. Kale continued, speaking quietly. "I understand your pain. I know what it feels like to care for someone and feel distant from them. That is why I protect them, not to replace you, but to give them safety until they can be with you again." The Queen's expression softened further. Humans had a way of turning understanding into action, and she felt the truth in his words. The daughters stirred more, recognizing the Queen, but not moving away from Kale. They had found safety, and that safety was built on his patience, care, and courage. Humans had a way of bridging gaps, of connecting hearts across impossible distances, and Kyle embodied that. The Queen approached cautiously. "They trust you," she said softly. And yet, they are mine. Kale nodded, keeping the children close. I know, he said. They are yours. I only kept them safe until they could choose to return. Trust cannot be forced. It must be earned. They chose safety, and now they can return to you without fear. The daughters blinked, their eyes moving between Kale and the Queen. Slowly they rose, still keeping close to him, but also acknowledging their mother. Kale smiled softly. Humans had a way of creating understanding where fear once ruled. They had the power to show courage and care in ways that could reach even the most guarded hearts. Queen Zoraya knelt slightly, her presence both fierce and protective. You have done what I could not, she said quietly. You earned their trust. Kale bowed his head in respect. Humans had a way of showing humility and courage at the same time, and he knew that this combination had saved the daughters. As the sun dipped below the dunes, the first golden light of evening bathed the desert. The daughters finally curled up, not just against Kale, but in a circle that included him, the Queen watching closely. Trust had been formed, fear had been eased, and hope had been rekindled. Humans had a way of enduring, connecting, and creating light in the darkest moments, and Kale's actions had proven it. The Queen's gaze softened further. You may stay near them, she said. They trust you. Perhaps you can teach me something about your kind. Kale smiled gently, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and the quiet hope that humans could inspire understanding even across the widest divides. That night, the daughters slept peacefully, curling against Kale's chest, safe and warm. The Queen remained nearby, vigilant, but calm. Kale thought of those he had loved and missed, the distance he had felt from them, and realized that hope could carry him across any separation. Humans had a way of holding hope, acting on it, and creating bonds that could overcome distance, fear, and uncertainty. And so, under the glittering stars of the desert sky, Kale held the daughters close, steady and warm. They were safe, alive, and trusting a human completely. The Queen's anger had softened into respect, and Kale knew that through courage, empathy, and hope, humans could bridge even the greatest divides. The reunion had been more than physical. It had been emotional, a triumph of heart and humanity.